So I am here with my new / old friend, Jen, because because we started talking when I posted on the Georgetown alum website, right?
Yeah.
For people to review my book, and you reached out and you were wonderful. And then of course life distracts us and Corona distracts us, and you're still wonderful. But then you also have, when did you graduate, by the way? I forgot to ask.
99.
In 99, you said?
Yeah.
Oh, so did I.
Yeah. Well, big school, and yeah, you wouldn't, it's amazing the number of people that I've come across. And I'm like, how did I not know you? Because it's not like Georgetown was that big, but
Well, that's what I'm saying. And I don't think we have any mutual friends in common. I'll have to check though.
I don't know. I was in the Phantoms. That would have been probably the only like connection of just some random that you might actually know.
Yeah, no, the Phantoms were one of our singing groups, our a cappella group.
Yeah. One of the acapella groups.
You. I knew the Chimes because I knew this guy Dexter who was in it and then abandoned school. And then yes.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
Dexter was in our group too. He was in the Chimes and he switched over and then he left school.
Yes.
Completely.
Right. And now he has a little baby girl.
Oh,
yes,
sweet.
I know. We connected on, it's got to be either Facebook or Instagram, but fine. We found a mutual friend. And then a lot of my roommate was a stage manager for one or the other. And so I ended up in the various acting, just doing little things. And so
okay. Well, then you might have known because one of my roommates junior year was Aaron Durkee.
Yes. Who's now married to Nick Johnson. Right.
He's crazy.
Yeah, I podcasted with Nick Johnson a short time ago, and one of the things we were discussing is that it's funny because that he is now the editor-in-chief of Axios, because when we graduated Georgetown, they wouldn't let us have our own senior salute, whatever, in the Hoya. Like, we were all columnists, and right. There were 5 of us. I'm only allowed to name Nick and I, apparently. But they wouldn't let us have it because we had never been editors. And so we stole the templates and put out a fake Hoya. And now I spoke to Nick, and he's the editor-in-chief of Axios. Yes, but Erin has always been lovely, although I haven't spoken to her in.
Oh God, I haven't. I actually, especially because aside from the last 2 years when I moved back from South Africa. Before that, I'd lost touch because I was in the middle of nowhere. Like keeping in touch with anyone was virtually impossible. People literally were like, "We thought you were dead. We literally thought you were dead. Like, you were gone. You were there, and then you were not, and then
yeah."
Nothing.
Okay. So first of all, as I was saying to you before we started recording, is like I was listening to some of your songs on your website, and they're beautiful. You wrote them yourself, right? And they're raw, but you're also still a dork because at one of them you use the word deficiency to refer to your emotional capacity. I was like, oh God, it's so telling, and we could analyze the hell out of it. But
English major.
Yes, same English psych. But they're really good songs, and I know that's not what you're focusing on at the moment. You're focusing on a million things. You're just like me, but so one of the things that got me is you said that you felt burnout, which, at some point, I know, but I have been fighting, I have wanted to be, listen, my daughter's 9 and she really wants to be a singer, but also either a dog trainer or a vet. So we'll see where this goes. But I know a lot of people where when you're fighting for, to make that big break, which I'm still fighting for mine because clearly it wasn't March 20th. But when you finally get it, to me, from the point I'm at, the idea of getting burnt out is so foreign, and it's almost like a luxury, but so tell me, can you tell me how it happened,
So it's a weird thing. I totally get where you're coming from, because it's you're doing something you love. How do you get burned out? That's actually part of the reason, I think, for me, why I did. So before I moved to South Africa, I was doing music pretty much full time. I was doing freelance writing as well, but my predominant focus was music, and I was a touring musician. I think I released my first CD in 25, when I was 25, and was going out on touring around the country. And for 3 years, for 2 summers, I literally sang the national anthem at probably 150 baseball games, all over the country. All over. Everyone's like, I hope you like baseball. I'm like, I love baseball, thankfully. Otherwise this would never work.
Right.
But I was doing and I was constantly on the road, but I was doing I was totally DIY, do it everything myself. You know, the only thing that I hired people for were I hired producers and musicians to help me with the song, with the recording. And then everything else was pretty much me. So because I had started out in PR and advertising, I used my experience with that to be able to do all of my own media stuff and all of my own publicity, and partially with the change of the name. So the reason I went for the stage name versus the other was also the stage name differentiated me from the person behind the business. So when I called people to book myself, I called myself as my real name to book my stage name, and they thought we were two different people.
Yeah, my co-author asked me to do that before the book came out. She's like, "Can you record?" And I was like, "No, I cannot, because it's a lot, and I have enough on my plate." But
yeah,
good for you. So you sort of subtly did it, and it was less. Mine was supposed to specifically make us seem cooler than we were. So.
Well, mine was also a bit of a ploy, because it made it seem like, oh, well, she's got somebody who's her booking agent, so she must be something. You know, it's amazing. It's just like it's a psychological thing that people distinguish, saying, oh, well, you must, like, if somebody could have no money, but if they're driving a nice BMW, people will suddenly look at them differently. It's just, unfortunately. But anyway, so I was doing that, and I was dealing with a lot of, well, it was just a lot. It was, I think, the last year before I left, I played 248 shows. 248 shows in a year. And I kind of just said to myself, there's no way. Like, I was driving myself all over the country. And then I was playing these great venues. And in some cases, they were like, we'd set a contract and it was, this is how much you'll be. And then they weren't paying me the full amount. And then they would, like, if I went back and said, well, look, this is what our contract is. Oh, well, we had to make a change because of this. Or you didn't draw as many people as we thought you would. And I was like, well, that's bullshit. That's not what the contract, I don't care.
That's the definition of a contract. Yeah.
That's the definition of a contract. Right, exactly. And so there were instances like that. And then there were so many Me Too instances where it was like part of the challenge, I think, of being an artist in front of people, like on a stage, is you sort of become a thing, like an entity versus a human being. And suddenly, and you see it all the time when you talk about, like, when people talk about celebrities and how they want to know everything about them and they feel like they're entitled to know, and like all these paparazzi that are like, well, we're going to sneak in and take pictures because we're entitled to, because they're a public figure. It's like, no, you're not. You're not entitled to their personal life. You're entitled to their art, which is what their job is as an artist. So anything beyond that, it's like, no, guys, that's wall. It's a wall. And so there were a lot of instances where the wall was just broken, and I was like, I'm done. I am
that wall is drastically different than the movement that you just referred to, and I won't delve too much into it, but I absolutely. It's funny when the Me Too movement came out, and I had to explain to my father-in-law, like, no, this has happened to every woman in one form or another, and mine was like minimal and stupid, and I was 15, and some boy like led me into a room where, whoops, the lights don't work, and like, the story doesn't end awfully. It just ends with me being too dumb to say no, and whatever, make it out. Or when I was at Georgetown and I went to a psych professor to see if I should double major, and I just wanted his approval because I was young and dumb, and he like looked me up and down, and I was blonde hair and big boobs, and said, nah, you'll never do anything with it. Obviously different, but also messed up. So
no, it's again, it's that underlying current. It's like what everybody's talking about now. It's a systemic problem, and it's because it's been accepted for so long. Well, not even necessarily but complicit. Like, people have complied with.
Yes.
Acceptance or not, complied with. And it's just become the norm, and so people just don't say anything. But I mean, and I'll tell you, like, my last straw was being at a festival, and this great camping festival, and we were sitting around a campfire, and there were like 30 people around this campfire. People are playing songs, they're trading. It was like super chill, like hippie-dippy, peaceful, happy, yada yada festival vibe. And this guy was literally sitting right across the fire from me, and he was a booking agent at the time. He's actually now, since, thankfully, not doing it, but he kept very loudly making these very lewd, obnoxious comments about me, commenting on my looks, on my body, on blah, blah, blah. And then getting that, because I was just like, okay, and like, really, it's not really appropriate. Not okay. And he just kept doing it and kept doing it. And he was definitely drunk, but again, no excuses.
Nope.
So he finally, I think, got fed up because I wasn't feeding into it. But again, people they weren't saying anything to tell him to shut up. And that was it. It was like I was on my own with 28 other people around us. And the last straw was he finally got up and sort of stumbled. And you think he would walk away. Instead, he literally almost walked through the fire, came over, and then like lunged at me, grabbed me, stuck his tongue like in my mouth, hand in my crotch, hand in my chest, like and he's like nobody did anything.
Right.
I was literally in front of an entire group of people in a public environment and nobody did anything. Right. I'm fighting the guy off. And finally I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like music is.
How did you get free from that?
Just a lot of kicking and pushing finally. Like the thing is this is what's sad because people have these comments of, well, I'm going to train. And if somebody were to do that to me, I would punch them. And I will tell you, I was that person who was like, oh, I totally would be because I am so reactive. I'm like, you want that? All right, whatever. I am definitely that hardcore sort of, I mean, I come across like that. But when that happened, my whole body froze.
Yeah.
I was in such shock and nothing was processing and I couldn't figure out what was going on. Like it just wasn't computing. And so initially I did nothing and I have no idea how long it could have lasted. Every sense of time goes out the window. And when it finally registered that this guy is assaulting me, then I finally started throwing arms and legs.
And no one stopped.
No one stopped. Nope.
Yeah, I am a very confrontational, to the point where sometimes it doesn't need to be. Like last night, this mom's group I'm in, someone posted a picture of a plant and everyone was like oohing and ahhing over the plant. I was like, are we talking about a plant? Like, so no need for that, Lindsay, but
I can guess that.
I'm like, this is a fucking plant, right? Like, but it's a fern apparently, which makes it important. So whatever. But they tolerated when they started sharing what they were making for dinner, and I started photoshopping their shit and just changing like the tone and the angle, and so they didn't kick me out of the group then because I'm not fucking kicking anything. But when it comes to like physical, I freeze. Like my brother's so my niece once when she was young, the whole water wings thing, she thought she did on her water wings, which is why you shouldn't train a kid to swim with water wings. And she fell into the pool and I like froze, I was 2 feet away. Right. So I would have done the same thing. And I don't care how much training I have. I still think I'm a physical confrontation makes, or physical movements is not I would get killed in a zombie apocalypse very quickly. Very cool.
I really do think it's a situational thing. I think you find out like when you're in it, you find out when you're in it.
Yeah.
And I remember somebody had posted something, and of course, Facebook being the home of, armchair activists kind of thing. But people were saying, well, they shouldn't have.
I'm a racist, I got told last week. So go figure. Yeah.
Oh, well, we're all these things. But it was really interesting that people were posting stuff because I remember when all the stuff came out with Kavanaugh and they were talking about how, it's how frequent and how many people that that have experienced this in some way or another. Some obviously worse than others, but still, it's like it's everywhere. And somebody was saying, well, we just need to train women to be able to take care of themselves physically. I'm like, you just don't get it. I was like, I had all that. Like I used to do kickboxing and everything. Like I could have kicked the shit out of the guy if I had been in the frame of mind that I could actually even process. But when you're in that space, it's like somebody in a war zone. It's like, you don't know how you're going to react until you're actually in it. And when you think you've got total control over your body and everything goes wrong. You like all the systems suddenly go, not computing, haywire, emergency. And you don't know what to do. So it's.
And by the way, just as a side, I need to share this because I'm still pissed about Kavanaugh. Like that still gets my blood boiling to a 10. And I know it's been like years, but I just need to share my fucking fierce anger. Okay. So
I hear you.
Yes. So you decide to move away from.
Yeah. So what I basically decided was I needed a break because I just needed to get a break because I mean, my passions in life are and like the environment, it's nature and it's music. And those are like my two driving forces and like all the other stuff that sort of comes with them. But those were always the two things that I absolutely loved. They were like my place. So my happy place is being outside in the woods or at the beach or wherever, just outside. And my other happy place is music. And I playing, performing, recording, all that stuff. And so I said, look, before I start to hate what I love, like an intrinsic, fundamental part of who I am, and what makes me a person, I got to get away. I got to step away. And I wanted to do it. And I also was feeling like with the music, as much as I mean, I love it, but it was always really important to me. Like even when I was a little girl, like the first poem that I ever wrote, which is, so you talk about being nerdy and like, you'll so appreciate these both of these. The first poem that I wrote was about the plight of the California condor and DDT. So the first song that I wrote was about saving the oceans.
Wow.
And I was like 9.
You were very brainwashed by that.
Oh, I was so like, I'm going to change the world, and I'm going to, this, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to be Jane Goodall, and I'm going to, and also somehow like Whitney Houston, which doesn't quite, but whatever.
Yeah, but Whitney Houston then was different than what we know Whitney Houston.
Well, yeah, well, that's true. That too. But it was also like the Whitney Houston version of Jane Goodall was like, how's that going to work? So, I just felt like with the music, I was really like two things that we talked about just before, the environment and like working. I love working with kids. I don't have any kids. I've actually never wanted kids, but I love working with kids. And I've always felt like, cause when I was a little girl, I grew up the youngest of 5 kids, but we got a big age gap. So I kind of grew up like an only child in a big family with 4 older siblings. And, I kind of never really felt like I fit in anywhere. And my heart went out to all of these kids that were struggling. And I was bullied when I was a kid. And it was always really important to me for people to have a voice. And I always felt like I didn't really have a voice because as the youngest child, it's like, everyone's like, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so, which is also why I talk really quickly, I'm sure, because I swear that
super quickly. I was going to say, I should put a disclaimer at the beginning that like anyone who normally speeds up your recording, do not, you will miss it. I was going to slow you down, and then I was like, that's rude. I was like, but I was just thinking to myself, I was like, some people listen to podcasts at like doubles. I don't know. I don't.
Oh yeah, no, not me. No, you actually have to put it in half speed with me.
Right. I want to hear everything and get a chance to think about it. But I was like, I hope no one tries to speed up this podcast.
Yeah. So, but part of that comes from being the youngest child, and the only way you're going to get heard is if you just get it all out as quickly as possible.
Yep.
And so I had to learn to be really quick on my feet and be able to fit in as much and be as articulate as possible in as short a period of time as possible. So, and also when I get sort of enthusiastic, I just go right.
Yeah, same.
So, but yeah, so it was always really important to me to feel like I was making a difference, making a positive impact on the world. And with the music stuff, I was starting to feel like I wasn't doing that. I felt like I was living in a very insulated bubble. And even though I was interacting with a lot of amazing people, it was really important for me to sort of, if I was going to be out there in the spotlight, that I was putting across and touching the lives and helping the lives of people, particularly for me when I was a young girl, the whole thing with bullying, the whole thing with like body image,
yes,
discrimination for gender in general, like being told you can't do that because I remember when I was a little girl, I was like, oh, I'm going to be a National Geographic photographer. And they're like, girls don't do that. I'm like, why?
Yeah, girls, I think girls do that now.
They certainly do. But in fact, some of my photos were used for National Geographic projects. And so it's like, I did it anyway, bitches.
That is amazing. I did not realize that. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So when I moved to South Africa, the whole idea was I needed a break because I didn't want to just destroy that passion. I didn't want to end up hating something that was so fundamentally who I was. And I also really felt like I wanted to be giving back in a more meaningful way. And I didn't feel like I was making enough of an impact with the music. So I went actually on holiday with one of my roommates from college was living down there, and she had been working there for 3 years, and she was on this contract where every 3 years she was moving to a different country. She ended up staying, thankfully, because it was great. We ended up like being able to actually see each other on the other side of the world. But so I wanted to take a break, and I was like, I've always wanted to go to Africa, and she's in South Africa, and why not go someplace where I know somebody? Sure. And of course it ended up happening that I booked the trip, and then she had to do an emergency work trip. So she was only there the last day I was there, but it was fine. It was good. Got to see her anyway. But so I went down and I volunteered. I volunteered in 2 different places. One was in the townships outside of Cape Town, and I was doing some photography work for this organization that's actually based in California. And they were building a women's center, essentially, that was also, it was teaching women skills so that they could broaden their horizons and get jobs. And it was also the kids that they were also taking care of. They had classes for the kids so that the women could be doing these classes while their kids were taken care of.
It was teaching women skills so that they wouldn't be just restricted to women's skills.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, I felt that and I had to. Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's exactly. So teaching sort of, I mean, even simple things like in South Africa, there's a lot of women that work in sort of in domestic care and housekeeping and that kind of stuff. And the simple thing of just teaching them how to turn on a dishwasher.
Yeah.
You know, when you go into someone's house and it's like, you haven't had that growing up. You need to be able to, because that'll get you more jobs, and it's each one sort of piggybacks on the next. And so anyway, I spent 2 weeks there, and then I spent 2 weeks up in the bush in KwaZulu-Natal, which is the province on the farthest northeast side of the country, just south of Mozambique. And we did priority species monitoring. So we were basically following critically endangered animals that they had tags on, so either GPS collars or VHF collars, and we would track them every day, track their movements, track their health, track dynamics within the groups, dynamics within the species, dynamics on the actual reserves itself, all kinds of work. Their work would go to bigger organizations like the World Wildlife Fund and Panthera. And
I should tell you, I actually understand what you're talking about because huge Shark Week fan here, so I understand.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So that, and I fell in love with it. And while I was there, I actually met a ranger who I also fell in love with. And so I ended up talking to the people who own the company, the species the monitoring company, about potentially doing a job. And so they're like, yeah, well, we actually would really be interested in somebody who can liaise with US universities to bring in, because I was doing it as a volunteer, and I knew a lot about science because I had done a lot of my own studies on my own, you know, and took a few classes in college. But I knew that a lot of the volunteers that were coming in were really coming in because they wanted to be in Africa and go on safari. And it's like, yeah, but this is legit conservation work. These guys aren't just running around the reserve and saying, look, elephant, look, lion, look. There might be an amazing herd of elephants right there, but we got to find the dogs, because our job is to find the wild dogs, because there are 5,000 left of them in the world, and we are responsible for monitoring their populations. So sorry, I know you want to sit with the elephants, but that's not what we're here for.
Right.
And so the idea was essentially to try to get to US universities and bring in students that were already ecology and biology and zoology and in that area, and find a way to do sort of a work study program or a study abroad program where they would get college credit for taking part in the field work. So sorry, we have neighbors. I'm actually at a friend's because I just left my boyfriend yesterday. So
was that the one that you fell in love with?
No, it was a new one.
Okay.
What I fell in love with, and I moved to South Africa. I ended up moving to South Africa a month after the trip. So I came back, packed my life, and moved down. And then I got down there, and they're like, yeah, we can't put the program in place yet. We don't have the funds or anything. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I just moved here, and I don't have a job. And all right. So I ended up working my way into working with the organization still, not in an official capacity, but more as like a volunteer, but not as a volunteer.
By the way, did you just say you just left your boyfriend yesterday?
Yeah.
Okay. Not gonna delve. Just wanted to make sure that I had heard that correctly.
Yeah. So I was the guy that I was dating in South Africa. We were engaged. We were together for 8 years, and I ended up leaving South Africa. Again, getting to the point where I felt like I could do more by not being there anymore. Like I was on the ground, and it was amazing. I ended up being able to, because I can talk to anybody, and pretty much was really good at taking complicated information, like a lot of the science and a lot of the conservation stuff. I was really good at taking that and turning into sort of digestible, everyone can understand this sound bites. And so content became my thing. I became the person that they were like, we need someone to write something like this to get out to the shareholders, or to get just to the communities, or to get to, social media. And I was also a photographer. So I ended up doing a lot of photography and writing and handling, being in the fields, doing the field work, and then getting the work out to the broader audiences. And I loved it, but you're still very isolated because you're on game reserves and there's nobody for miles, and communication's minimal. Cell phone service is minimal. Internet is really minimal. And so I just felt like I wanted to, again, get further along and do more with it. And I was really inspired about getting kids involved a lot more, because I have found that with kids, you get them on it and it changes the world. Like it really and truly, they're the guys that affect the change. We're all like us and older, we just get lazy, we get comfortable, and we sort of lose that spark. And I remember working with kids on one of the game reserves. They were like 6-year-old kids, and 3/4 of them didn't speak English at all. I was speaking in fumbled bits of Shangaan and Twana, and like I know 15 words in like 90 languages, it feels like at this point.
I know none of the words you just said, but I'm nodding politely because I can get the general gist of it.
Yeah. So it's there. South Africa has 11 official languages. Thank God one of them is English. But still working in the game reserves, you have people from all these different cultures, and you have to learn a smattering of Zulu and Xhosa and Shangaan and Shona and Tswana and so, all of these languages, just to be able to just get by and to be able to call out animals when you're in the field and you have the radio. You need to be able to tell people where you are and what you're looking at.
Right.
You have to learn. And also because a lot of these reserves have lodges, so there's guests. So that when you're on a radio, the call goes out to everybody, including the safari guys. And if you happen to come across a poached rhino, you don't want the guests knowing. You don't like, because it just, you don't, some people don't want to see it, but some people also want to sensationalize it, or it's just, it's not good. So you have to learn how to say all the animals in all the different languages and communicate certain. Anyway, so I had these little kids, and they were so fired up and eager and interested in learning about everything. And they just were these giant sponges. They were like, just give me more, give me more. And they were open to stuff. And if it was a concept they didn't understand, and you found ways to connect with them, and they're like, oh, I get it, light bulb. It wasn't this, well, what about this? And what about that? And I know better because I've read this on social media. So I was like, no. They just were like, okay, that makes sense to me. Like, how I'm going to make this relate to my own world. And so that sort of sparked this whole thing in me that I wanted to come back, and I wanted to start doing work with kids, with environmentals and arts, because I actually found what was really fascinating is that art and science are pretty much the same thing. They're both the search for meaning and understanding in the world around you.
Sure.
And
Music and math.
They are, exactly. And so, you know, people are like, how did you go from being a touring songwriter to working in conservation in South Africa? I'm like, well, it's communication, and it's an interest in learning more about things. And a lot of the same skills apply. You've got to be adaptable. You have to be able to effectively communicate with people from all backgrounds. You have to be able to roll with the punches you have to be able to deal with not making any money. You have to, and you also have to have an openness and a curiosity. And a lot of the sort of the scientific method goes straight into creating a song. And it's, you start with an idea and you want to flesh that idea out. And if it doesn't work, you start over. And it's like science. You have an idea, you have a hypothesis, you set out to prove it or disprove it, whatever you end up doing. And if something's not working, you have to change things up and start over.
Right.
And so it's all these things that correlate. And so I was like, well, how do we get kids? First, I wanted to see more girls involved with the sciences stuff. And also I wanted to boost the value of the arts, because both of them are fundamentally important. And I kept seeing these kids who kept getting told that they weren't creative. And I was like, that's such bullshit. Everybody in this world is creative. You just have to find your voice. Everybody has their way to do it. You might not be painting, and you might not be like, you know, Picasso and Monet and, you know, Bach, but you can create. Every one of us has a creative spark. Whether you're building incredible teams, that's creativity. That's being able to create and solve problems from whatever, the ether. So yeah, so I basically, my ex-fiance and we split up. I moved back to the States. I moved back to the States to find out my brother had cancer. So I was literally, I came back.
What year was that?
2018.
I'm sorry.
So, which is the reason I didn't end up finishing the book in time, by the way. So that's disclosure. So I came back, he was in the hospital. We were all sort of switching roles to take care of his kids. His wife was with him most of the time in the hospital. So, and he has 2 teenage kids, back and forth with that, shifting around schedule, and also trying to restart my life in the States, which was a whole different country than when I left 8 years prior.
No kidding. Yeah.
So I came back to such a hostile environment and a family that is ideologically on the other side of the spectrum for me. And I had just split up with my fiance. I had just left the country that I loved. I had just left a career and job that I loved. I was completely starting from scratch in what felt like a war zone.
Yeah.
And then find out that my brother, my oldest of the 2 brothers, was sick. And I was like, oh shit. So I had a bit of a meltdown for a few months.
I would too.
And was trying to sort of pick up the pieces with everything while juggling all this and dealing with the emotional fallout. And While I was in South Africa, I actually had this weird experience where I ended up raising a praying mantis. I found him like a teeny tiny nymph. It was literally this big. And he ended up in my house, a little cottage, and he just was there and he never left. And he just sort of became a thing. And then it was kind of funny because I'm a photographer and I'm like, well, I can document this and we can tell, I'm a storyteller. I'll tell stories about this. And it just became such a funny thing that my mother was, at the time, she was going through radiology, and she would tell the people at the office what Santiago, which is the name of the praying mantis, what he was doing and what he was up to. And like, they would ask about, when my mother would call me, she'd be like, how's Santiago? How's my praying mantis? And I'm like, oh, I'm fine. Thanks. He's fine. He's good. So it just became this ridiculous story. And everyone's like, you have to write a book. And so I said, well, there we go. There's a perfect in. I am a storyteller. I'm a photographer. I have this really cool story, and it's a great way to connect people to things that they normally don't like. It's a bug. It's an insect. Most people hate insects. And I'll tell you, I was certainly one of them, and I still hate mosquitoes with a violent passion. But it was, let's put a face to something. Like all the uglies, all the redheaded stepchildren of the natural world that people love to hate, that are actually amazing, and also showing the value in all of these lives. Like that little bug does so much good in this capacity, and how that reflects in other areas, and have us as human beings the same thing. Like all the actions that we have and how they reverberate into the world around us, that whole butterfly effect kind of thing. And so I set out to tell the story from his perspective so that we could switch it around, because we keep looking at things from humans' perspective. It's like, well, what if we looked at it from something else's perspective? And some of the things that we do that are so asinine and really don't make any sense, and actually only end up helping humans at the expense of everything else on the planet, which then inevitably affects humans negatively.
Sure, it's like
all that stuff.
It's like the wishing tree in a way. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I find it more, I say more like stone soup, like the wishing tree. The tree just keeps giving and giving and giving, and finally it just dies. And I'm like, no, we don't want that message.
So we're talking about two different wishing trees. The giving tree is a.
Oh, you're talking the giving tree. Sorry, yes.
No, but the wishing tree is some book that my son tried to get me to read that I found profound and not up my alley, but it is told from a tree's perspective. Like it's like a famous book, and I was like, why am I reading about a tree? But I also was not in the right position, and there was no underlying, or perhaps there was an underlying, I never made it past page 75, but regardless, you know, this sounds, I think I'd be a lot more interested in a praying mantis. I don't mind bugs. I hate snakes though. I'm sorry. That's right.
It's all good. I mean, people have their things. I've learned to actually love snakes, but it took a long time. I had a black mamba in my bathroom, which is like, why not have the most venomous snake in the world sitting in your toilet? It wasn't a toilet, but he was
probably some like primitive Freudian fear of, you know, P9.
Well, no, it's understandable, because there's one thing about being afraid of the other. There's another thing that snakes are so fundamentally different from us.
Right.
They're cold-blooded for the most part. They have no visible limbs. They run around on their bellies. They have no ears. They have no facial markings. They have, except for their eyes. You know, they've got a little tongue. They've got a tail.
They are a tail. They are a tail.
They actually have a tail. I know it seems like they're one big tail, but there actually is a point where they have a tail that starts.
But yeah.
But they're so fundamentally different from us that sometimes it's like, and I think that's kind of what I was trying to do with the book, was to show that there are actually so many similarities in a lot of things that we tend to look at as an other. And there obviously are others. There are many things that are very different as well, but there's sort of the inherent beauty of everything. And that was kind of the goal of the book. And also I wanted to turn the book into an opportunity to do school visits with kids where you explored the environment and the importance of the environment and how each one of them has their own individual voice and can make such a profound impact. But on top of that, to show how art and science can come together and how everybody has a voice and your creativity comes through in that voice. It's just a question of finding what that voice is. So I had actually, finished the book. I self-published it and had it going out into the world, and it was cool. It won the Children's Book Award, which was awesome.
That's fantastic.
And then sort of the bottom dropped out because my brother got much more sick. And I couldn't actively promote the book because we were pretty much constantly running back and forth to the hospital. I was also still doing music, actual shows. I was doing bookings of shows. So I was playing shows and then going to the hospital and then coming back and then working on some of the marketing where I could. and still writing and recording. I finished a new EP in November of new songs as well. So it was like there was so much going on. And then my brother passed away in February, and then COVID hit 2 weeks later.
I'm sorry.
I was like, woo! Well, yeah, it's been 2020 has really not been a great year.
No, it hasn't. It hasn't been a good year for anyone. I was sort of waiting and sort of hoping that maybe your brother did end up getting better, although the shrink in me was like, fuck, this is going nowhere good.
It's funny. It was weird. He did for a little while. He got better, but unfortunately, with his situation, he had a form of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma that was like affects 1.1% of the people that even get non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and it was in his central nervous system. Gotcha. So they couldn't adequately treat it. It just kept showing up somewhere else. Yeah. So talk about systemic. So he was getting better, and then around Christmas time, we were all together for Christmas, and then just after Christmas, he just kept saying, he's like, something's not right. And my brother was a doctor. My brother was actually the team doctor for the Phillies. The Phillies and the 76ers. He was the head team doctor for the 76ers, and he was a team doctor for the Phillies. And so he knows when something's not right. And 2 weeks after Christmas, 2 weeks after Christmas? 3 weeks after, no, end of January. He wasn't feeling well after Christmas. End of January, he went in to get a PET scan, and he found, because the last time he'd had the scan in October, he was completely cancer free, and they're like, oh my God, he had this really amazing treatment and it worked, awesome. And he was doing physical therapy so that he could start walking, because he was in the hospital for like 6 months. Yeah. And then at the end of January, he went back in for a scan, and they found a terminal tumor, basically on his brainstem. And I think that was when it was the end. Like, that was it. I think he finally just gave up.
And I don't think it's giving up. I think the upside about being a doctor is when to call it.
Well, that's what I mean. Giving up it's definitely not the right way to say it, but I think he finally said, there's nothing more that can be done. Right. And a week later he passed away. So that was also, I'm like, oh shit. Like I never really got the chance to fully grieve the leaving South Africa, leaving my fiance. And during the course of all of this, so this is now, I've been back for a little over 2 years now. I met my current boyfriend, and we started dating in about sort of March of last year. Right. And he's north of Boston, and I was staying with my sister in New Jersey, and my cousin in California was kind of bouncing. So we basically were like, well, if we're actually going to make this work, you're kind of nomadic right now. Why don't you just move in here? So I moved in there in June, but then was constantly running back and forth because my brother was in Philadelphia and hospitals in New Jersey. So it was back and forth with that, back and forth with shows. I started doing school visits with the book so I could start doing this whole workshop around science and creativity and like environmental stuff. And started doing bookings for that. And then he passed away. And 2 weeks later, we had all the COVID stuff. Every single thing out of my calendar was shut down because all the schools closed, all the venues closed. Like all of my areas of income were just like, yeah. So I was finally starting to get back on my feet. And then he died, and that hit, and then the COVID stuff died. So my entire income stream that I had been trying to work steadily for, despite everything else, gone. And then obviously the COVID stuff, being locked away with somebody for a long time can be great, or it can be really difficult. And
pretty sure it can just be really difficult. Speaking from personal, I think it can just be really difficult. And I realized that as much as I'm probably sound super gregarious and outgoing and extroverted, I'm actually a closet introvert. Like I can put it on, but then I need a week off. Like when I used to do my shows afterwards, I'm like, don't talk to me. Just like, I'm not a mean person. I am drained. So and my ex-boyfriend is an uber extrovert. And so he was always, wherever I was, it's like, come into what I was doing and just start talking. I'm like, I'm in the middle of doing something. What are you doing? And like, so it was like all these other things that started falling into place that were just sort of negatively impacting. And I realized that I hadn't had time to process anything that's going on. And so once everything shut down, then all of a sudden it was like, woo, now I have time because I ain't got nothing but. Yeah. I've got so much, which was actually in a way good because I still felt like I was playing catch up, which I even still do, on so many things of just getting back into what I was doing and cleaning out my life, like reorganizing everything and coming back from South Africa where I had to revamp my
all my websites, my, get the book publishing stuff going, like writing this, writing that, learning new programs. And now that COVID started, I had to learn all the online streaming stuff and all the programs that go along with that, which is not just as simple as turning your phone on. It's like, you got to do this and then you got to do that. And because as a musician, you have to worry about what the sound is like.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, as a podcaster, I was like, fuck, it's like God's intervention that I knew how to do this shit before, you know?
Yeah. So I think basically what happened, I mean, a lot of things, it was a perfect storm of so many things. And I think I finally, and then everything that's been going on, I've got a lot of friends are Black. They're married to Black people. They have Black children, I have constantly been worried about them. And then once everything erupted in the last 2 weeks, it was just like, everything has been just insane. Like emotionally, I can't even imagine what it's like to be in that position, to have to worry about my life every time I walk out the door.
Yeah.
I did that when I was in South Africa, but that's because there were like lions. It's a very different thing. And like, that's a threat that you understand. Like
right.
you don't, with humans, you don't know. We're so different. And
so actually, I think that unfortunately it's come to a point where white people or white police officers are a threat that Black mothers have to raise their children to understand. And
right.
And I hesitate to say too much because I sort of misspoke and got, lambasted on Facebook last week. It was really exciting. There were lots of tears. But I will say, like, this is a tough time. And so my husband works at a inpatient psych ward. And so we are living separate lives because I'm home with our 9 and 11-year-old, and he has to go out and pretend that things are real. And he's prides himself on not being anxious or depressed ever. And whereas I am like the open book of like emotional fucked upness. And so it's right. So it's tough. Like I literally used to go on first dates and just pour my shit on the table and be like, my mother sucks. And like, just like, emotionally vomit. And then they had to decide if they were going to ask for a second date or not. But my husband is the opposite. He stuffs everything down. And so like, it has been some tough times. And, I think it's tough for all of us, but I have to tell you, I love as a mom. Okay. Well, first of all, I do not know how many people in our age were, smart and brave and bold and, just think outside, creative enough to decide whether or not they wanted to have kids, So like, that's a whole other issue which I'm super impressed with because I never give it any thought. And I am not super maternal. I used to do art. I'm loving, but I used to do art projects with my kids so that at the end I could be like, look, we did something, like quantitative. But at my daughter's 8th or 9th birthday, there were a bunch of these like pretty cute girls sitting around the table, and they started asking like questions, and one of them goes, how many people like coding? And all the girls raised their hands. And so it was a very proud moment that I managed to catch on tape too. But so I think what you're doing is incredible. And I think right now OutSchool or whatever other online platform would be a great way. I would sign my kids up 100% because we lacked a normal school year. And so I think it's time to teach them to learn differently and different things. Yeah. And as a fellow writer who was screwed by COVID, we had this big Cradle of Aviation Museum launch planned. I have The Handmaid's Tale hardcover signed by Margaret Atwood. And like we were gonna sort of like raffle off all these things and raise awareness about destigmatizing mental health. And then literally March, our book launch was on 18th, March 13th, they closed everything down. So I hear you, but you have so much to give and in so many different ways. And you're probably going to drive yourself crazy like me, but it's okay. Yeah.
No, it's okay. Like I actually, it blows my mind when people are like on board. I'm like, how are you bored? How are you bored? There's so much.
I don't know.
Like, why having the social interaction like you have normally, but I'm like, if I would give anything to have 48 hours in a day, because I'd be learning new languages. I'd be like, I would be doing even more stuff if I could. And it's just not enough time. And, but yeah, getting back to just an interjection with regards to your daughter with the singing stuff and the music one of the nicest things of going abroad it gave me a reset. And COVID has been the same thing. It's a bit of a reset.
Sure.
To be able to prioritize things a lot differently and realize what's truly important and what's not. And I was lucky enough to go through moving overseas and changing careers and directions entirely in some respects, to be able to set back and step back. And what I realized is coming back, like, I loved music and I could get back into it, but I don't have to be on the road 24,000 days a year. I could just write for people. I could record for film and TV stuff. There are so many, and that's the other part of sort of what I want kids to realize. And the podcast that I was talking to you about that I want to get going, and I've already started signing up people to talk, was actually it's psych.
Don't be offended. My mother doesn't know what the fuck I do, so you can say it either way. It's okay.
Is it are you psychology?
It's psychology, but my mom doesn't know. You don't have to, so don't worry.
Well, with regards to that, you could be a great person to talk to as well.
I would love to. Yeah.
But so taking this podcast and showing how the natural world informs so much of what's going on around us, and how everything is interconnected and how we are all interconnected, just to build an appreciation, but also to show people in different fields, particularly women, particularly people of color in different fields, especially the non-traditional quote unquote fields. So there's that, but with your daughter, it's like I really want to show people also that we also sort of have this we don't get a lot of, I realize this, we don't get a lot of training or education as kids about what's available to us.
Yeah.
We sort of train kids to follow this path, and it's just, this is the way you go and that's it. It's like, well, no, there really is no path. It's your choice. And you have to be aware though of what's available. Like if you don't have an awareness, you don't know which paths you can, like which way you can tread, or if you're treading your own path, or if you're going to diverge and converge or what. So showing kids all these opportunities that are out there, and explaining that in these fields, like, you might love music, but you might be tone deaf. It's like, well, you're not going to probably be a singer, although we could probably work around that too, given all the technology.
This is true.
But
teaching them other things.
But you could be you could be an entertainment attorney. You could be a manager. You could run a book, well, not right now, so a bunch, but you could run a venue. You could, like, there are so many ways that you could use your passion for something and your love and your set of skills, and not have to be the person on stage singing, or the actor in the movie, or the doctor on the front. Like, you could work in pharmaceuticals. So it's like, there are so many ways that you could get involved in these fields, and so many opportunities for you to make your own personal mark.
I agree 100%. My daughter is currently doing songwriting in her free time. But I also think I'm not a huge fan of my daughter's teacher. And so there was a funny exchange yesterday, and I thought I would share it with you just to sort of close out on like the creativity aspect of music. So my daughter said, and by the way, as we are Facebook friends, if you look, you'll see that I posted something yesterday of my daughter, like, because they had to, I told you it's a virtual play it, the musical. But so they assigned them to pick a country. Somehow my daughter picked Turkey. I don't know how, but she picked Turkey. And then the teacher decided to extend the assignment and said, they gave them a bunch of different ways. She gave them a bunch of different ways to do it. And my daughter was confused. She said, wait, so I find a form of music from Turkey. Teacher says, if you want to do that, either share songs and types of songs from Turkey, sing them yourselves, or be creative with music from Turkey. And my daughter says, okay, but there aren't many songs with lyrics in English in Turkey. And I was like, yeah, we'll talk about that part of, explore the world later, but whatever. So then the teacher said, okay, so then I would choose another project to complete. My daughter says, okay. And then says, she comes back, is there a way I could possibly dress like they do in Turkey? And the teacher says, well, it's music and dance. So is there a dance you can dress up and do? And my daughter says, sure, I will look. Then she says, oh, I'm searching for a dance and dressing up because when we searched, that outfit looked like an outfit from the play I'm going to be in. It doesn't, but regardless, the teacher, who's obviously done with the school year, said, okay, sounds good. And then my daughter says, hi, how about if I dress up in Turkish clothes and sing a song? It's not Turkish, but it shows and represents the people of Turkey's rough life. The teacher says, sure, what song is it? My daughter says, well, I found 2 songs. One of them is Fight Song by Rachel Platten, and the other one is just about friendship and how the people of Turkey are great friends and can count on each other anytime. It's called Count on Me, which is Bruno Mars. And so somehow my daughter convinces the teacher to let her dress up and sing Bruno Mars as a contribution to this ridiculous Turkey report, which, like, I'm going to give points for creativity. Right. I was like, this, okay, fine. But that is another way that we could explore creativity. And it was just so funny. And I had to say, like, the kids need to understand that these things are all creative, not only for like systemic racism issues and social awareness, but also for like, I don't know. I like I said, I love teaching classes on Outschool. I teach, and the Salem witch trials. And like, there's a lot of things about the Salem witch trials that are similar to what's going on now in America. And I'm very excited to get your book and to read it and have my kids read it. And I thank you for talking to me and dorking out with me. And please, please, please ask me to come on your podcast, because
I will. And if you know anybody else that would be interested, I am so it's so important to me with what you're saying, getting the voice, letting kids know that they have a voice, and they building their confidence and finding their specific thing that they love, because it's so easy. It's not easy, but in theory, it's so easy to just follow that track and climb that ladder. And then there's so many people that are unhappy. They are miserable because they're not living their life the way they want to be. They're not living who they are. They're living what they've been told and what's comfortable, and like the sort of the sheeple kind of mentality. It's like, but you want more. Everybody wants more. And instead of numbing yourself from things, face the things, but find a way to be who you are, so you don't find yourself having to numb yourself from reality.
I agree 100%. And I'm going to give some thought. I mean, I have been podcasting now for a little over a year, so I've gotten the opportunity to meet a lot of amazing people, and also know a lot of amazing people. So I am going to think of who we can have, who would be a good person and represent just, all the things you want to represent, both, it's for little girls, it's for people of color. It's also for people who are not of color and who just live a sheltered existence, or whether that be in a poor rural neighborhood or somewhere where a doctor and lawyer are stressed as the only options. And we wanted to think outside those boxes.
Well, and also all little boys to see that these roles are open to, it's for everyone to see that these roles are open to everybody. So it's a pretty big goal.
Your goal is to change 1 or 2, and you start there, and then they change 1 or 2. Like, that's your goal.
But I gotta tell you, when I was doing the first school visit that I was able to do before we went on lockdown, I remember second school visit, I remember meeting a girl who came up to me. I think she was 6th grade, and she was like, I just love that you, because I did this whole presentation for them with the work that I'd done, and was telling them some of the stories of the work. And I was like, I'm probably going to be the only person you ever meet who's been bitten by a cheetah. And they're like, what?
We didn't even get into the cheetah discussion. We'll do that another time. Okay.
But the girl, first of all, that got all the guys' attention. Like, every boy in that room was just like, her coolness factor just went through the roof. Like this, so it wasn't just, oh my God, she's working with all these animals. She got what? So, but I remember her coming up to me and being like, thank you. It's so nice to see someone that looks like me. And I've always wanted to get involved, and I never knew how, or if there was really a place for me. And I was like, oh, sweetheart, I am the queen of you will make a place for yourself. If there isn't room at the table, you're going to push aside those chairs and squish everybody else out so you can get in there. Like,
I say this a lot. My husband likes to say I'm the queen of second chances, which means like, you might as well give her what she wants the first time, because she's coming back again. So that is awesome. Thank you so much, Jen. I am so excited. And we will definitely talk more about the cheetah another time.